Oh, hi there. Good morning. This is Brother Logan Isaac, broadcasting from the Appalachian Abbey in Knoxville, Maryland. I mentioned that the social distancing and everything going on with the COVID-19 pandemic, people are really learning how to use social media well as a means of connecting with one another and giving us some kind of something to look forward to that we don't have while we're being prohibited from congregating. So every weekday, hopefully, at 11 a.m., I'm going to read a chapter or some amount of reading from the life of St. Martin of Tours by Sulpicius Severus, written in the early 4th century. Actually, I'm sorry, the late 4th century. I'm doing this as a Hospitaller of St. Martin. I'm broadcasting from my own page, or my own profile, unfortunately. I'm going to make this public now. Hopefully next time I'll remember to do it correctly from the Hospitallers page. But before I get into the actual life of St. Martin itself, as kind of an intro, I was going to read this wonderful little book, Snow on Martinmas, by Heather Sleightholm. Yeah, Sleightholm. She did all the images. This looks like a pretty nicely done but self-published book. Here's Heather right there. And this was a gift to me by the Nelsons. They know of my really uh, vigorous fanboyness of Martin of Tours. And I wanted to start with this one because it goes into a lot more depth than a lot of people are aware of. It's really nice. It's not November, so it doesn't really fit because it's snow in Martinmas. But I thought it'd be a fun introduction for everybody, for adults, for kids, before getting into the nitty gritty with the 4th century biography later. And if you're wondering, yes, I am this disheveled on an everyday basis. You're lucky I'm wearing clothes. So, Snow on Martinmas by Heather Sleightholm. It's snow on Martinmas, Granny cried, throwing open the cottage door. Snowflakes were whirling wildly from the sky, the first snow of the season. No lantern walk today, I'm afraid, she sighed, turning back to Katie and Thomas. But it's such good luck that we won't mind. And you can see it's really wonderfully painted colonial kind of uh, scene as I struggle to turn the page. I don't know if you can buy this online. I don't know where the Nelson found it, but it's a wonderful little book. What is Martinmas? Katie asked, for she had never heard of such a day. Why, child, Granny said, it's the feast of St. Martin, one of my favorite feast days as a girl. She gathered them round her table, while she watched the roasting goose and set the kettle to boil. St. Martin was a Roman soldier. Here he is. She explained. A handsome lad, I'm sure. One day the air became like ice and snow began to fall, a day just like today. He came upon a poor crumpled beggar huddled on the road. The man would surely freeze and die with nowhere warm to go. Martin, so comfortable in his horse and cozy within his beautiful thick coat, took the coat from his shoulders, cut it with his sword, and draped the longest part on the man. Something spoke inside his heart and said it was the right thing to do. And there you can see him cutting his coat for the beggar. He hurried back to encampment, chilled, but soon fortified by food and fire. That night he dreamed of the beggar, who, wrapped in his cloak, stood to thank him, and who might he be but Christ himself? Is that true? Thomas asked, doubtful of the tale. Well, of course, Granny scoffed. Would your old gran lie? That's not even the best part. I'm trying to keep the glare from it, but again, I think Heather painted all of these images. Really nice job. So moved by the vision of Christ on the road, Martin decided to leave the army and become a monk. He spent his time in prayer and solitude, helping others where he could. He was such a good man that he was made bishop, although he didn't much want to at first. They found him hiding in the goose pen, trying to avoid the office. Ha! And that is why we're having goose tonight. And here is Martin, I'm trying to get on the road, or as he became a monk, and then this goose um, from the tale of him avoiding becoming bishop. When I was a girl, Granny went on, Martinmas meant the end of the harvest season. We'd salt our meats, cook our goose, and enjoy a bit of the preserves we've been making from our garden. You can see the preserves down there. It's kind of cute. Got a little kid on there in the back. It's very nostalgic. I love it. We'd even carve turnips and have a lantern walk, although I think they use paper lanterns now. Some old folks would wait to celebrate it on the 11th hour of this 11th day of the 11th month. Quite good luck, I would say, like the snow that says the harvest time is over. And then you can see the children with their paper lanterns, which is a common European tradition for the fall that was just kind of taken up on Martinmas on November 11th. And there's a scene from this little village. Oh, and they're pumpkin lanterns, actually. So I think she's American, Heather. That afternoon, as the snow fell down, Katie busied herself making lanterns to hang bright and warm in the kitchen window, while Thomas preferred to play soldier. Granny tended the goose, the tea, and often fell lost in thought. Yes, Martinmas was always my favorite, she sighed. It meant the hard outdoor work was done. We lit a bonfire, we ate apples, and a fine goose. Advent was on our doorstep, and it wouldn't be long till Christmas time. You can see them playing their lanterns that they'd hang from the windows. The day is well remembered now for other reasons, she told the children, as she took the goose from the oven and a savory and delicious smell that filled the little kitchen. For on that day of the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the Armistice was signed, ending one of the bloodiest wars this world had ever known. On that day, St. Martin's Day, the world's soldiers put down their weary swords and prayed for peace. And that day, the prayer was answered. And you can see the memorial to soldiers and family members lost, which is quite common in English homes and churches, and American churches as well. And so, let's feast, Granny said brightly, after a moment's pause. Get the finest dishes, the prettiest jar of jam and jelly, and set yourselves at Granny's table. For it is Martinmas, and the harvest is done. We're safe and warm and live in peace. St. Martin, pray for us. See the meal there at the end. And here she's done her own icon of Martin. I'll read what she's put. St. Martin of Tours was born in 316 in what is now modern-day Hungary. He was drawn to Christianity from an early age, but because he was the son of a Roman officer, he was drafted into the Roman army at the tender age of 15. His time in the army brought him to Gaul, modern-day France, where it is said he encountered a beggar in the cold outside the city gates. Martin was moved to take off his cloak, cut it, and offer it to the beggar. That night he had a dream that the beggar revealed himself as Christ, and Martin was inspired to leave his military career to live as a simple monk, spreading the gospel. Later in life, Martin started the first monastery in Gaul, and gained such a reputation as a good and godly man that the city of Tours begged him to be their bishop in the year 371. It's 372, but that's not historically supported. According to legend, Martin was so overwhelmed by the idea of being bishop that he fled into the monastery barn to hide, but the squawking geese gave him away. The city of Tours had to trick him into coming back to town by requesting he bless a sick person, and when he arrived, he was brought into the cathedral to be ordained bishop. Martin of Tours, as he was later called, spent the rest of his life traveling through Gaul, converting pagans, tending the sick, and even performing miracles. He died in the year 397 in Caen. in Conde, which, along with Tours, has become a site of pilgrimage. Later, he was declared a saint and is the patron saint of horsemen, the poor, soldiers, and tailors. His feast day is November 11th, and it has long been celebrated as the end of the harvest season in countries across Europe. Modern history also celebrates this date as Veterans Day and as Armistice Day, because on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, World War I was officially brought to an end. And I might add here that 1918 was the same year that the influenza pandemic, also raged across Europe. Soldiers coming home spread it as well. There were some countries and cities in America that did well, others not so well. But this I wanted to read very briefly as a really kind of nice, quaint introduction to um, the story of Martin of Tours. Starting tomorrow, ideally at 11 a.m., honoring the 11/11 date, feast date. I'll read a selection from Robert Alexander's translation, 1850s translation, I think. Maybe it was 1890s. I'll read a short selection of that and try and do it from the Hospitalers Facebook page to save the video for later so you can use it to learn more about Martin of Tours and hear the story straight from the horse's mouth. And also, if you're interested in Martin of Tours, please consider visiting the Hospitalers website, hospstmartin.org, or our Facebook page. And also, if you go look on GoFundMe, I have started a campaign to try and raise money to reprint that biography into a normal, regular, modern trade paperback. But otherwise, I appreciate you stopping by, Jacob and Jim and Barbara. Hopefully I'll figure out a way to move this video to the Hospitalers page. Can't promise anything. But I hope you'll join me tomorrow and every weekday at 11 a.m. to read another selection. And also every morning between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. for First Formation, which you can find at anchor.fm/firstformation, which is the weekday morning prayer podcast that I share on the Hospitalers Facebook and Twitter pages. I appreciate you joining me. I look forward to continuing to read the life of St. Martin for the Hospitalers and for really anybody who's interested while we're all hunkered down. Thanks a lot.